first, there's only been one team in the history of the NFL to run the table, and although the 70,000 who were at the Superdome on Monday might have thought differently, the odds of the Saints going undefeated weren't very good, even if this team is. Today in Charlotte, New Orleans may have ended up on the short end of the scoreboard, and Saints fans are plenty used to seeing that, but it took all 60 minutes before the Panthers could breathe easily.
Breeze throws incomplete for Joe Horn.
There was no fast start this week for the Saints. No blocked kick, no early lead, no first down until 2 minutes left in the first quarter.
Had we just been able to kind of get a drive going, I think that I look to, us as an offense, and every time we get the ball and get one first down, I don't know what the statistics are, but we usually march right down the field. But then there's those times where, we go 3 and out.
It was a slow start for the officials as well. On Carolina's second drive, a completion to Steve Smith was later reversed after a Sean Payton challenge. On the same drive, a big third down conversion by Keyshawn Johnson appeared to be a reviewable catch, but Payton couldn't pull the trigger on a second red flag in less than a minute.
We don't get any feedback right away upstairs, so now it's just my eye and my gut, and you're waiting for something, and so I pulled off that one. Again, it ended up being a third down conversion. I've never seen a good clean shot of it, and I may have missed it, and that's my fault.
The Panthers would score a play later to make it 7-0, but would only gain 86 more yards until late in the fourth.
And Reggie Bush fumbles the football. Panthers on top of it.
In the meantime, the Saints would eventually take the lead, but miscues would limit their point total.
Not taking anything away from them. They're a great team, great defense, but we felt like today we definitely shot ourselves in the foot and didn't make plays when we should have, and we knew what we were capable of.
Trailing by 3 in the fourth, Carolina responded. A 12-play drive covering 91 yards would give them the lead. After the Saints stalled, they needed their defense to make one more play. It wouldn't happen.
You can't play 3.5 quarters of good defense against an offense like this that traditionally does really well in the fourth quarter.
The Saints, though, went down swinging. Rookie Marcus Colston's 86-yard touchdown and the 2-point conversion made it a 3-point game, but that's where it would end. A tough loss today, but a good beginning for the season.
3-1, we can't be disappointed with that. But the reality of this game is you can't look at 3-1 right now and say, hey, I feel pretty good about ourselves. You need to just keep a real level head and don't let your emotions go too far up or down.
Here are the numbers from this afternoon. Drew Brees completed all but 10 of his 38 passes. Those 28 completions went for 349 yards, 1 touchdown, no INTs. In the running game, both Deuce and Reggie carried the ball 11 times apiece, with McAllister scoring once, that coming in the fourth quarter. Brees shared the ball today, connecting with 10 different receivers: Marcus Colston, Joe Horn, and Ernie Conwell, each with a team-high 5 receptions. Reggie's numbers: he caught 4 passes, averaging 12 yards a catch. Joining us now in studio, WWL radio host and the Saints sideline reporter, Kenny Wilkerson. And Kenny, believe it or not, the Saints do have a tight end. 1 catch, one time they've thrown to him in the first 3 games. They threw to Ernie Conwell and Campbell quite a bit today.
Kind of went to him down the line, too, at crunch time. Went to Ernie a bunch of times, and it worked out well with some of the plays and not so well with other ones. Probably had a lot to do with the defense, and what we saw today was this team go up against a Super Bowl caliber football team. This was a defense, this is a very solid defense, and they knew it going in and probably tried to mix it up and tried to throw some other things into the game plan that they haven't shown yet.
Not trying to second guess what Sean Payton did at all, because I know it gets a little hectic down there on the field, but after that Steve Smith review that was overturned, then the Keyshawn Johnson pass, which we've seen several reviews, that didn't look like a pass either. Carolina comes up with the hurry-up offense. They get the touchdown. What are some other options maybe Sean could have done right there? Because he says he hasn't been able to see a clear view of that play. What are some other options he maybe can use down the line if this ever comes up again?
He has to rely on his coaches upstairs at that point. I don't know if whether or not calling a timeout is the answer or would have been the answer at that point, but there are times that he has to just rely on on the coaches most of the time, as a matter of fact. The Steve Smith play, he saw completely. He had an unobstructed view down the line there as to what happened, and he immediately ran over there. The coaches didn't tell him anything. He immediately ran down there and threw the flag out. So he saw it himself. But most of the time, you got to rely on the coaches upstairs, and in this case, it's one that got by him.
Yeah, he called it a gut feeling. Usually you do want to go with your gut. This team, you've been with them in the past before when they've lost. You said that you saw something, though, a lot different, though, with this team after a loss.
It's kind of a controlled anger that was in the locker room. A rage, if you will, but, I mean, a lot of players just mad. Nobody hollering and screaming, nobody pointing the fingers, nobody blaming anybody else for anything. Just mad at themselves for things that they did wrong. There was a lot of the little things they didn't do quite right today. I mean, they made mistakes that they haven't made in these first 3 games going into this. Now, they've made mistakes in the other games, and it wasn't like they, made a ton of mistakes and, drove you crazy with them, but they made them there was some mistakes made at just at key moments, key times that put them in 1st and 15, whatever the case may be. It just came at very inopportune times for them to have some of these things happen to them. And I firmly believe that when, these players and this coach says that they'll get that cleaned up, that they will.
And, of course, that could have a lot have been attributed to Carolina and the way that they play. 21-18, the final from Charlotte. Loss number 1 in the Sean Payton era, but all is not lost. The Saints still atop the NFC South at 3-1. Still ahead, it was. Before today, the Saints and Panthers had split their previous 22 meetings right down the middle. New Orleans had won 11, and so had Carolina. 7 of their last 10 meetings had been decided by a touchdown or less. These games are usually predictable and usually always close. And as Jim Henderson reports from Charlotte, one mistake can go a long way.
It was a typical Panthers-Saints game. This was the way the Panthers like it, particularly the outcome.
This is kind of what they've been good at for a few years now. So they like letting games get down to the 4th quarter, and somehow they squeak a lot of these games out.
In these kinds of games, every mistake is magnified. The Panthers aren't going to make many, and today they made none. The Saints made 1 at the Carolina 19, trailing 7-0.
It's a turnover, so a fumble's a fumble, and something we've talked about. The ball came out last week, and it's something we've talked about with him.
The Panthers caught the Saints with a hurry-up touchdown. Delhomme to Smith for 6.
I guess they figured, they can catch us off balance by moving the ball, and snap the ball real quick. I mean, those guys, they had a great game plan.
Sean Payton did the same thing to old friend John Fox for the Saints' first touchdown in the 4th quarter.
Just a little thing we have, where if we want to hurry up with the play, we can do that. We've done it throughout the course of the early part of the season. So, and it wasn't so much that they were running off. A lot of times you can keep them in a certain personnel grouping and keep them from substituting to a heavier defense.
The Saints could easily have packed it in after the Deshaun Foster touchdown run for a 21-10 lead. Marcus Colston went 86 yards in a hurry to keep the outcome in doubt until a failed onside kick.
Time was running down, and we need somebody to make a play, and it just happened to be me.
Colston is a man of few words. There wasn't much more to be said, really, about this one. In Charlotte, Jim Henderson, 4th down on 4.
Back with us tonight on 4th Down, Saints sideline reporter Kenny Wilkerson. And Kenny, since April 29th, the day the Saints drafted Reggie Bush, the fans and the rest of the NFL have been waiting to see what kind of impact this guy will have on the field. We saw glimpses of it in the preseason against Tennessee, but really since then he's kind of been held in check. Are you seeing him, although he says he's not, are you seeing him maybe start to press at points?
I don't think that he's pressing. I think that's the wrong word to use in what Reggie's doing. Reggie's just playing his game. Reggie has to learn and find out that by watching the films and game experience that it's a whole lot faster at this level. Preseason was one thing, but they're in the regular season now, and while in college he may have had 1 or 2 guys trying to catch him and trying to tackle him that were of NFL caliber. He's got 11 coming at him, and they can't take that away from him. They can't try to overcoach him and try to remove too much of what he does best. He's a great player, and he's going to deliver. He'll break loose in some in times down the road. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But like in this game today, Early on, they were trying to pound him a little bit. They were trying to pound Deuce. Well, Deuce was having more success, so they kept going to Deuce, and they kept pounding him because he's a bigger guy. He can break the tackles. Reggie's going to break those tackles when they're down low. They're grabbing at his feet and use all those quick feet that he has and get away from him. But I don't think that he's pressing. I think that he has to learn that you know, by watching that they're going to close in on him fast, and you know, rather than trying to juke around when he sees he sees 2 and 3 people close to him, he thinks he can get away from them. When there's 2 or 3 around him, he just has to pick a spot and go at it and pick up some positive yardage rather than trying to dance around it.
Right, a 1-yard loss much better than a 5-6 yard loss like we saw on some punt returns today. Reggie Bush, after the game, talked about how fast defensive linemen in the NFL are. 0 touchdowns Reggie Bush has through 4 games. He says it's not a problem. He's more concerned about wins.
I'm not going to get caught up in how many touchdowns I get per game and you know, how many stats I put up. You know, it's about winning. And, you know, today we didn't accomplish that, and that's the ultimate goal.
He's going to get opportunities. He'll continue to get opportunities. And, you know, I think it's going to be one of those things that, you know, once the seal is broken for him and he scores that first one, then hopefully it'll just be overflowing with him, you know. And, I mean, I think we take pride in, you know, we have a lot of weapons. We get a lot of guys that, you know, we try to spread the ball to. And it's kind of like, hey, each game we don't know who's going to be the guy that game to score, you know, 2 touchdowns or kind of, you know, go off. So it's one of those things where we feel like we use that to our advantage. And, you know, Joe hadn't scored yet either, but, you know, hey, that's not a big deal. Joe's going to get his touches. Reggie's going to get his touches. And I don't think either of those guys are worried about that at this point.
Yeah, and what they're doing, Kenny, I think, is they're waiting for this month, that important stretch of those several home games in the month of October. They want to do all of their scoring in front of their home fans.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, you know, last week was an unbelievable experience in that dome. I mean, I even had people in Carolina today talking about it, that, you know, they watched it on television, couldn't believe what they were seeing. And anybody that was in the dome last week really understands that there was a distinct home field advantage for this football team now. Not that there ever wasn't in the past, but it is big time now. And I know they're looking forward to being able to play a bunch of these games at home and have that crowd behind them. And, you know, some of the things that happened today may not have happened had it been at home. But you know, as they say, it is what it is, and it happened on the road. And you mentioned it earlier, they're 3-1. They lost today. They stood toe-to-toe with a quality opponent, and they're still in first place. They have no reason to hang their heads.
The Saints are marching in, a very popular song to be played at home games. Maybe U2's The Saints Are Coming, though, will be played at all of the home games from now on. You can catch Kenny Wilkerson each weekday from 5 to 8 on WWL Radio and every Saints game as he roams the sidelines. Thanks for joining us, Kenny.
My pleasure.
To that. Thank you, Juan. Consider yourself a Saints fan? Well, of course you do. Then you should be able to tell me when and where the Saints make their next road trip. No? Well, I had to look it up too. Not until November 5th when they go to Tampa Bay. 3 home games in the bye week will keep the Saints from packing their suitcases the entire month of October, and won't that be nice? It should be if any semblance of the support the Saints received in their lone home game against the Falcons shows up for the other 7, and it should. 1/4 of the way through the season, the Saints are 3-1. Now that projects, of course, to a record of 12-4. If you win all of them at home and half of them on the road, that projects to a record of 12-4 as well. But a great deal of football must be played and tendencies addressed in the weeks ahead as the schedule stiffens before that sort of season should really even be considered. Through the first 4 games of it, the Saints have been thankfully free of major injuries to frontline personnel. Some of that personnel has delivered far beyond expectations. Others, less so. Based on what sort of impact they've had thus far, would you want the first pick in the draft on your team, the 2nd pick, or the 252nd pick if you had to pick just one? Would you want Mario Williams, Reggie Bush, or Marcus Colston? Yesterday, Marcus Colston, the 252nd pick of the draft, caught 5 passes, 1 for an 86-yard touchdown, the longest of the day in the NFL and the 4th longest in Saints history. He now has 20 catches in 4 games, including 3 touchdowns. He sat virtually ignored by the media in the post-game locker room yesterday, while one of the players the Saints paraded to the podium at the media's request was a running back who has yet to sniff the end zone in 4 games, who carried 11 times yesterday for 22 yards, whose longest run was 5 yards, and whose primary contribution to the outcome was a crucial fumble at the Panthers' 19-yard line. It wasn't supposed to be this way right now for Reggie Bush. Neither was it supposed to be this way right now for Marcus Colston.
Now, I'm guessing that neither will be substantially affected by the results of the first quarter of the season. But if they are, I would guess that this is how Sean Payton would counsel them. Now look, Reggie, it's going to happen for you. You just got to be patient. Keep working hard and learn from your mistakes and stay within the structure of the team. You're going to start hearing from your critics now. Use their words as motivation. And remember, the people in this locker room know how much you have meant to this start, even if the statistics don't yet reflect it. We know otherwise. Can you handle adversity? As the great ones inevitably must. Marcus, can you resist the allure of the spotlight that will begin to shine on the player some have already labeled the find of the draft, and others will as they start perusing the statistics? Can you continue to ignore the forces of ego that seem to inevitably turn wide receivers into the divas of the NFL? Can you continue to be Marvin Harrison and not Terrell Owens? Can you handle success as the great ones inevitably do? Sean Payton's message to both would be, don't forget what got you here, and you'll remember what'll take us there. Their journeys as individuals promise to be as interesting as the teams over the last 12 games. Look forward to joining you on iNews.